for I am justice itself.
Hello and welcome back to Group B in the HGC Finals group stages. We are one match in. We just saw Fnatic take a clean 2-0 victory over Darksided. They move on into the group. And now, up next, Team Freedom from North America up against Beyond the Game from China. Who's going to take it? Let's head on over to the analyst desk with Kalaris and find out.
That's right, thank you very much, Cloak, and indeed our second series about to commence in just a few moments' time. But of course, we had our first series conclude, Fnatic taking that 2-0 victory. Quite handedly, I would say there, going up against Darksided. Joining me, we have Kaldor, we have Wolf, we have Skimmy. And Skimmy, you've gotten to cast your boys home and away. You're basically neighbors. It was an impressive little cast that you did there.
I mean, it was good to see them come out guns blazing, not going to be too deterred by the fact that it is Fnatic. A lot of teams, they overthink, they get into their heads, right, of thinking, you know, this is a team that's far superior to us, and they start to choke and crumble under the pressure. As Gilly mentioned, this is a team that's extremely confident, so they said, let's just play our game, and as I mentioned, they're looking at those replays and saying, cool, the series that we have potential against is BTG and Tempo, sorry, not Tempo Storm.
Freedom.
Team Freedom, right?
Yep.
So I'm thinking NA. So let's see how we can really improve from that and go into these next series.
Yeah, I feel like the performance we saw...
I see you looking at me. I'm like, he just wants to say an NA LOL joke. I know, I've already butchered myself.
No. I was just like, NA, those teams are all the same.
I feel like
Same level.
I want to bring some serious respect to the desk for a second. I feel like what we saw out of them, of course, it really reminds me of what we saw out of Tempo Storm losing their match against CE yesterday.
Right,
They didn't look very weak, particularly in the matchup, and it's certainly a case where we could see an upset later on in the group for them.
Well, let's check in with the bracket for Group B that's occurred so far, with Fnatic taking that 2-0 victory over Darksided. Unfortunately for Darksided, they fall down to the lower bracket. They have one more shot at redemption later on. Next up, Team Freedom is going to go on against Beyond the Game as we continue.
Don't do that.
No, you did that. Did that trigger
I mean,
you
we've
for
all
a
been to a
moment?
bunch of
Yes.
Chinese WCGs.
Exactly.
Okay.
we have attended a few WCGs. I know that song. I know that reference. Don't do that to me, please.
I'm just hoping.
I beg you.
I'm hoping the 10 people that got that out there appreciate
I
that.
personally loved it.
Yesterday,
You do you, man.
Yeah.
I talked to Dignitas yesterday. They had no idea what I was talking about. I was just like, okay,
Because they're all 15 years old. Anyway, sorry, go on.
10 years.
Yeah.
And I was just like, look it up right now. And they actually, Baker was like, I think I know that now that I hear it. So yeah, it was.
I almost saved that for when
Memories.
Grubby was up here, but I decided, nah, I'm just going to go with it. So, we have Beyond the Game going up against Team Freedom here. Let's start, of course, here with Team Freedom. Obviously, them coming off the back of what we consider to be, I want to say, Western Clash success, because they looked actually strong, or as the strongest representative from North America, going up against the European teams there, and did well in Phase 2.
I actually think there's a lot to talk about the team. It was really interesting because, as you said, at the Western Clash, they presented themselves really well for them having their first offline experience there and going up against opponents on an international stage. They themselves didn't really feel like they performed well. And I have to admit that after the event, I was just like, okay, these guys are looking awesome. I want to see them in the actual Phase 2.
Right.
And then they started playing. They lost their first match. And in my head, I was like immediately like, yeah, okay, they did well one event and now they're down. But they actually just pulled through. They look fantastic right now, and I think they are one of the big two North American hopes at this point.
And to further that point even further, they said that they think they're the strongest team alongside Roll20 that have ever come to an international event, right? So to have that kind of confidence off the bat, we've seen confidence from NA teams in the past, and we've seen the performance on the day, either in groups or actually in the stages, and we think, is it that fake confidence, which is a case of our mentality is there, but our performance doesn't really represent or replicate that. But they're saying, you know, top 4 is our goal. We think that we have a chance. Our group is good. And there is a potential for us to go to BlizzCon and prove people wrong and build the success that we had from the Western Clash.
Yeah, I feel like when you have a breakout performance, like most people would consider that performance of the Western Clash like a really big breakout for this team. Their first big LAN, they have this great performance, and their response saying, we don't really
we didn't really think we did as well as we could have. We didn't even live up to our potential. I think that speaks a lot to where this team could potentially go.
Yeah, who knows what could have happened if they'd have won that base race against Liquid at the Western Clash. It was just a minor thing, and then from there, who knows. Let's shift our gears and focus on Beyond the Game here, who, it is no secret, unfortunately for them, they have come in with 2 of their members, and they have 3 of their other members from other teams in China. So we don't really know what to expect from this team, Caldo.
The interesting thing is that they were described as a Chinese pickup team.
Yeah.
The problem is that it feels like it's the story that it repeats itself at every single international event, that you have teams in China that come in with 1 or 2 subs. In this case, we now have 3. But they always are a threat. First of all, it's very difficult to research for them because they literally haven't really played in this formation in any video material that you can gauge. And at the same time, we know that Chinese players are first of all mechanically skilled and also very aggressive. So you never know what you're up against. It makes them very difficult to evaluate on which level of performance you're going to encounter.
I mean, we're talking about a team here that when we met them for the first time, as we interviewed all the teams, of course, they had only played together as a 5-man for about 5 days of time. They've had about 3 days since then as well. So maybe like we're looking at just over a week of time to practice and train together. And they have players from not all the top Chinese teams as well. They've got, you know, players from like Hot Lady, for example. 365 is actually like kind of a part-time pro gamer, part-time caster in China. So I think that's a really cool storyline to follow. But oftentimes when we have these visa problems, sometimes it looks like we see like SPT or E-Star looks like a Chinese all-star team. But in this case, not so much. So I think there's a high chance this team is going to struggle in this group just simply because of both the problems in terms of team synergy and the problems of mechanical skill that is in this 5-man.
I mean, the thing that I'm really excited about is the fact that they've said flat out that we're going to play aggressively like the Chinese region does, with nothing to lose but everything to gain. The thing that really upset me about C is they said the exact same, but then they tried to transition into a sort of more macro-heavy performance. You said that's not your strength. You said it yourself. That's not our strength. We build for team fights to make up for the weaknesses in other areas. So in a case like this where they literally have nothing to lose, that is that big wild card. A lot of people are writing them off, but I'm interested to see how they come out game number 1.
Let's find out which battleground we're going to for game 1 here between these 2 teams, and it will be Battlefield of Eternity for Team Freedom. What are we making of it, Wolf? I'm going to start with you.
I think Battlefield of Eternity, a really exciting map for these 2. I do like, you know, watching Chinese teams play this map. They play a really similar style to the Korean style. Usually it's very objective-based. They'll try to fight to get the objective. They don't lane a lot. They don't try to soak for extra experience. So does it favor China here? No, but I'm excited to see how BTG Beyond the Game kind of uses their own style on this map.
But it kind of feels that it plays into their cards since they say we want a team fight. So this is exactly the map where you can focus heavily on team fighting compared to big 3-lane maps. So I actually really like from their perspective that this is the first map here, but we have of course to remember that it is the map choice of Team Freedom. And I'm really excited about this match in general because the first one, we knew there was a clear favorite. And in this one, you can argue, yes, Team Freedom is the favorite to head into it because of the problems that the Chinese teams have with their visas. But at the same time, it's still the wild card in the group.
Yeah, certainly
BTG believes that it's going to be a 50-50 chance for them to actually beat them. And just to correct everything out there, guys, just to keep you guys as updated as possible, Beyond the Game actually chose this map. So let's get into it. Game number 1 as we start things between Team Freedom and Beyond the Game.
That makes a lot of sense because of the team fight that they already announced they would search. And at this point, I mean, really fast start into the draft. This is way faster than anything we had so far from previous teams. Greymane banned out, the hero that of course excels as an all-rounder, is a great addition to any kind of aggressive playstyle, but also has huge amounts of immortal pressure. And we see Morales banned and Oriel taken, so heavy focus on both sides on the supports.
Yeah, and we're going to see Murden picked up here early for BTG. That's going to give you a lot of control if you're behind in the immortal race, as we like to call it. Murden can give you a lot of space there, can come and kind of invade, slow down those attack speeds, and kind of delay. So we don't know what DPS they're going to run here yet, but the big question now is, does Freedom want to commit to the battery in this rotation? And the answer is no, they're going to save that for later.
And that was my point I was going to discuss, actually, was we don't really know exactly what Ego plays as that sub-player for that tanking role. So what does his Arsenal have available? I really love the adaptation here by Freedom already to say we know that Tyrael is typically a very Chinese meta pick, so let's deny that and we can run that sort of all-in composition to try and match the aggression that you want to show us.
Terrazine being banned out as well. We talked in our previous series already about how teams are starting to prioritize him a lot more. We expect him to really have a huge impact on the tournament here, since he just adds that mobility. And with the draft that we already have for Freedom, you can see aggression. With Oriel, normally you would expect the second support to come in, and Terrazine gives you, first of all, of course, his healing abilities, his panic button, but at the same time also the on-target damage that you have. And if you jump in with Tyrael, with the Sanctification and Sonya, then it's exactly what you want to have to just blow a target up. So a good ban for Beyond the Game.
Yeah, it's going to give them a lot of potential to dive. You've got Sonya, a strong solo laner, can really control that lane. At least we'll see what matchup she ends up facing to, but it's very strong matchups most of the time in the meta right now for Sonya. Then you have this ability to, if you don't have good poke and you're losing the race, you can dive with this super hard, and you have so many ways to kind of collapse on a team that is winning that poke war.
Now, talking about the poke war, we see Tracer and Tacita, so again, Beyond the Game saying, hey, we want a team fight, we want to really bring the pain here. But we have not seen a lot of heroes that usually make a very early appearance on this map. Greymane was banned. Vala, on the other hand, with the traditional Q build, is normally a very high priority on Battlefield of Eternity for the immortal pressure. You can say the same about potential poke with Li Ming or even Lunara. And Team Freedom still needs some range damage, so those are heroes that could definitely play a role now for them in the last phase of the draft.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking Lunara would have been the go-to as the sort of battery here on the side of Team Freedom, but with the Tracer being picked up, I'm a little bit deterred. I mean, yes, you can get the spell shield later on, but typically speaking, Chinese teams like to get that sort of early game advantage, run with it, and sort of choke you out from any potential to turn things around. We saw the Sanctification coming out yesterday from Wind, which was a little bit lackluster, and you could argue that could have been a difference in that series with C up against Tempo Storm, but Team Freedom would have picked this knowing the Chinese teams want this, and would have been looking to try and utilize that in their fashion. Lunara then can be perfected as they go for Lucio Cassia.
Okay. Well, you know, I feel like with the Tyrael pick here, okay, we're going to see Alarak. I was going to say with the Tyrael pick here, you can't really pick Malthael, who would be exactly who you would want in any other situation. Helps you mitigate some of what Sonya can do to you in the solo lane. Alarak, going to add a little bit of spice here to this one. The silences are going to be targeted, I think, mostly towards Lucio in these fights to try to deny that sound barrier so they can win the fight with Tracer, the Pulse Bomb coming through.
I'm actually really excited for this one. This is a cool draft to start things off with. Having Cassia as a battery for Oriel is something that we see a lot more often, I feel, on the North American and also the European side. So that's already going to be putting a nice touch onto it. But Alarak is really a game changer. Depending on his performance, this game can be a win or a loss.
Yeah, I have to cement Cuddle's point completely. I feel as if the Alarak doesn't find their value. I believe we saw this once, I think it might have been Nomi up against Team Freedom or Expert back at the Western Clash, where they used the Alarak to try and counter the Medivh. Because if the Medivh gets the value, then, you know, the Tracer lives. In a situation like this, the same can apply, you know. If there is the Lucio to drop the Sound Barrier, null and voids the Tracer, and it becomes a dead pick.
You can also try to time, what's the, why am I forgetting the heroic ability for Alarak, is his defensive ability. Counter-strike, yes. You have to time Counter-strike to land when the Aegis expires, because that target can actually avoid. So if you aim yourself at such an angle towards the Aegis after the Aegis is used, the target comes out of Aegis and hit by that Counter-strike, sometimes you can just blow them up immediately. So it's kind of a cool thing they can use the Alarak for as well.
Yeah, I feel like, especially when you have Alarak, he can be a huge problem and a huge threat, and it's definitely going to take a bit of the pressure from away from Tracer, who will have more time roam, because Freedom will have to really watch out for Alarak so he doesn't land great combos in team fights later on. So it's always now all of a sudden 2 points that you have to keep in mind when you're approaching team fights in a 5 versus 5.
Final question, how pivotal do you think that the matchup between a Sonya and Alarak is here, and can the Alarak prevail in that situation?
I don't think so. I think Sonya's going to do really well in that lane matchup. Alarak's just going to have to play defensively. Might need to see some Tracer gank potential. So when Sonya wins the matchup, if you kind of let her push the lane in, then you can see the Tracer rotate up to try to get those picks. I think that's something that we'll see Beyond the Game try to make happen here.
The laning phase usually is pretty short here. So if you really focus on the team fights, which they said they want to do, I really like the pick for that. But in the lane itself, Sonya is just really tough to beat either way. But for what they said they want to show, I think the composition that BTG walked away with is really good.
Short thoughts?
I was just going to say, Q himself actually mentioned that, you know, the matchups, the solo matchups these days aren't really the biggest factor, because you can always just do swapping of lanes to try and counter that. As Kat already mentioned, a map like this, it's all focused on the objective, so the laning shouldn't be the biggest factor.
All right, thank you very much, gentlemen. Time for game number 1 now as we get into Battlefield of Eternity. Team Freedom goes up against Beyond the Game.
Well, welcome in here to game number 1 against Team Freedom versus that of BTG. I'm here with Grubby. Grubby, contrasting styles in drafts this game.
Very much so, Jayhow. We spoke to Team Freedom and they said because BTG is kind of almost like a pickup team with lots of different substitutes, they're expecting trademark Chinese aggression, and that means full balls to the wall, aggression, team fighting, and basically no dead moment. So I'm excited to see those styles square off because we have a very defensive comp from Team Freedom.
Very defensive versus very offensive. So without further ado, let's actually hop into game number 1 here, as we will have Team Freedom trying to secure that spot in the upper bracket finals here. We're going to see if they can do that against BTG, who of course coming in with the subs. We'll see how it plays out.
And I'm thinking here, what spirit must you possess to bam, insta snap pick Alarak in that final moment there in that draft? It didn't even take a full second.
You know what I always say, Grubby? If you're confident on a hero and you're in a draft, whether it's Hero League, Unranked, wherever you're at, you snap block that hero, you let the other team know you mean business. I always say that. You let them know you mean business when you snap block a hero.
Lay down that mental pressure. Alarak's sadism. Will it prevail this game or will it not? Beyond the game, full aggro, Team Freedom, very defensive composition here. What with Tyrion's shields, Cassia's blind, Ariel's healing, Lucio's healing, and we even saw in draft there was an opportunity to pick Vala with Monster Hunter to get that damage on the Immortal, but instead Team Freedom elected for Cassia, blinds, very effective against Tassadar and Tracer in particular. And so it is really not that much about that race. This map used to be played like an F1 race. Just go the fastest, you on your Immortal, we on our Immortal, and that's it. But now it's fully evolving into that team fight and into that one lane, and sometimes a little bit of bullying on that one-on-one lane, like already alluded to. And that's why we see Rhaegar and Alarak top. They are certainly a match for a single Sonya.
Yeah, single Sonya is going to struggle. We'll keep an eye on this top lane in particular, but you know, in the bottom, your number 1 response when you see that is simply that, what can this composition do? A Tracer doesn't necessarily, if she has single target damage early on, obviously she can stack her pulse bomb, try and get some pressure. But outside of that, you've got this aggressive push, and you don't really have the tools to deal with the defense.
Oh, definitely. Some of the best D-pushers are heroes that do not sit very well in the current meta. For example, Gul'dan with his Corruption and his Fell Flame, Kel'Thas with the Flame Strike and the Chain Bomb, but they don't do that well against these hyper-mobile, hyper-aggressive compositions with good sustain. So if you don't have them and you've just got Tracer here, you're gonna lose towers. But Beyond the Game fully accepts this, and they say we'd rather play a strategical warfare and put 2 members in the top, rather than going blow for blow in both lanes. And they've actually taken down 2 towers, as opposed to Team Freedom's only 1 tower so far.
And it all goes to that Lightning Bond at level 1. You talked about, you know, the talents that we can potentially see when it does come to the team fighting. It does really well when you're sieging. It does really well in the race for the Immortal. And speaking of the Immortal, we've got our first one right now.
Very advantageous position here for Team Freedom. They have their 4-man, and the Red Immortal spawns next to them. Gets them a little bit of damage done. But they don't want to go full 4v4, and why? Alarak is one of the best defenders at the Immortal phase. Pull people into those concentric stun circles, and they are set up for a nice and easy takedown.
We learned yesterday, it's all about the geometry, right? The circles. But, you know, it's a very interesting pick there, because it was kind of that last pick. You think about Cassia, she's got the shorter auto attack range, shorter than most ranged heroes. Lucio has to be within the general vicinity to make sure and get those AoE heals. So there is a lot of potential, as you just alluded to, the fact that you could walk into that 4-man feeling confident. Alarak will change your mind real quick.
So that's gonna have to be the game plan here for Beyond the Game. To defend on their own Immortal whenever Team Freedom makes the initiative to attack it. We see that kind of here. This downwards momentum, Team Freedom funneling into this area. Now Alarak has to wait till the next stun. There we go. Is he going to push someone in? And fails to hit the Tyrael.
He's trying. I mean, you're not going to have 100% accuracy, that's for sure. But when it lands, you'll know it. I mean, you always know when you get caught in that, it's like, all right, something bad just happened. It's very obvious right there. You see kind of the retreat. And we've seen this back and forth approach to where it's like, all right, we give up a little, the threat's there, we fall back a little bit, and then Team Freedom will slowly re-engage. And speaking of re-engaging, very nice detainment strike there.
Good job there, Collusion, hitting the 365, the Rhaegar here. A lot of back and forthing here on the Immortals as teams are clamoring for an advantageous position. In the meantime, Team Freedom has just done ever so slightly better on the laning in the north and south, and this is giving them a little bit of experience.
trying to soak as much as they can. Even if you lose the first Immortal, obviously you can find ways to play around it. You know, we've seen kind of like these dive-style competitions in North America to try and fight behind that. And speaking of a fight, we have them re-engaging here, trying to get it off to the halftime show. There's the silence. The Pulse Bomb's going to be on Nasmus, and a heal's going to bring you back up, but he was just mere pixels away on that health bar from death.
Plate of the Will on Cassia there. And that bonus regeneration, just a few points as long as she remains on the move with an eventual extra 10% maximum HP. In order to do this, she needs to get hit by auto attacks while moving. And it's about the amount of auto attacks. So look at Tracer and Tassadar. That is going to be a very easy quest to complete. And for that, he gives up the lifesteal from Ring of the Leech, but there's plenty of healing on his side.
This is one of those moments where when you research certain teams, they have a shield and it's an early Immortal. They'll sometimes push with it, sometimes they won't. A team like Team Expert comes to mind, is that they'll see an opportunity like this, they'll push another lane. But this is what Freedom does. They want to try and take advantage of their push. Yes, it's not a healthy shield. Yes, it's not the top tier. It's not late game where the Immortal comes in. But they look for opportunities. They have a strong early game composition. They're going to see what they can do as Sonya's split bottom. But the top Immortal getting, I think, a bit more value than I would have anticipated.
Now we see these kind of compositions from BTG before, where it is Tracer Tassadar, 2 warriors and a second support, where Tracer is the solo assassin. So we know that this can work. We see this on Tomb of the Spider Queen by many different teams. And in this case, the second warrior role is embodied by Alarak. And still it feels like Beyond the Game has difficulty getting a kill. Here we go with the pulse round on Ariel.
Ariel coming in there. That's, again, the Pulse Bomb is such a huge threat. Post level 10, it'll be a little bit easier. You've got the Sound Barrier, you've got the Crystal Aegis, you potentially have the Sanctification, so you have a lot of tools to deal with that. But more importantly, we have the level 7 coming in from Burden. That heavy impact is just every time you have the engage, the threat is very much there. Obviously, Alarak, again, trying to look for that. You talked about questing talents earlier. His questing talents, he's barely touched them at this point. And it's a very difficult thing for Alarak against this composition that is trying to avoid the heavy engages.
Yeah, very much. I mean, Alarak here needs to hit his silences. He needs to hit his lightning. And he's done a pretty good job of stacking up his lightning quest. The only thing he hasn't been able to do yet is to get 3 heroes with 1 center lightning. And this gives him back 10% sadism, which is PvP spell damage. But for the rest, he already has the slow that is attached to the lightning. He's got the range as well. So in terms of solo play, Alarak has been doing a good job. Now let's see what they can do with that. It's a 0 takedown game so far. The next Immortal will be spawning shortly.
It's going to light up, Grubby. I can feel it. This next Immortal phase, both teams prioritizing their Shaman camp. Somebody's going to try and hit that 10 spike. When that 10 spike hits, somebody's going in. You've got a very aggressive approach that you can take on the side of Team Freedom. And on the other side, for Beyond the Game, they've already drafted into that team fighting. So they're going to be more than willing, especially once they hit 10, to definitely take that team fight.
Let's see how that will envelop. Team Freedom has a lot of protection buttons. And they find an Alarak. Cleanse hits. Alarak telekinesis himself away, gets away. Good job Beyond the Game with the disengage. That's a 4 versus 5. Anytime you can stay alive in those, you are getting ahead actively because you've got a member in the other lane. Tassadar doing cleanup duty in the bottom lane.
He's doing cleanup duty, and he's got to do it quick. They're looking for the re-engage. Level 10, dangerously close, and we've got ST. He's going to be our first casualty of the game as Alarak goes down, pushing it even closer to level 10. They'll be able to clean up this wave. They'll be scant inches away from that level 10, and you got to imagine they're going to try and take that advantage because the Immortal on the enemy side of the map, easy engage.
And this would have been a difficult point to push into with Alarak alive, but Team Freedom expertly punishes Beyond the Game's risky rotation through the middle point rather than from the right side. They punish and they find a wild Alarak. Murden, one of the major mainstays in the first 2 days here of HGC, is already finding a very high participation rate with the 70% win rate. He went, I believe, 6-3 on day 1 or 5-3. He's continuing to see more and more play.
Not too shabby. We have level 10 picked up by Beyond the Game as the halftime show is kicked off by Team Freedom. They're looking to be somewhat defensive at the moment, maybe looking for that fight against Sanctification is a tool they could use to dive in, get the stun, the cleanse forced out onto Murden. They're going to go ahead and disengage as ST. Missing that, but Zagrug and team, they're going in right now, Grubby. They're looking for a fight. The blind goes down, and Beyond the Game wisely retreats.
you see all these spells, all this fireworks, and Team Freedom is looking at full health bars on their own side. They have so much layers of protection, and they're using it well. And they didn't really... Oh, hold that thought. Alarak comes in with the silence. Sanctification!
The sound barrier's out as well. That stun follow-up there onto that stun circle. Now the Immortal trying to put down that AoE. Ancestral has been used on SD. Ball Lightning on the backside going as well. Crystal Aegis in response here is going to keep them alive, and now they've got their attention turned focused onto Tracer. Nice Poison Spear, and they're looking for more.
Ball Lightning going around like a hot potato as they're juggling that one and taking so much damage. Tracer finds herself alone and will get taken out. And now an Immortal with 90% shields is going to be a significant threat that represents potentially even keep damage.
The recognition there by Tyrael coming in. He's like, oh wow, that looks like a bad scenario. Zugrug, he saw the stun. The Stormbolt came out from Muradin, locked him right onto it, same as they were trying to do in the previous one. Got the stun from the Immortal, the follow-up, and that was just very, very good recognition on the side of Team Freedom, and that's warranted them another Immortal.
Very clean play there. Cassia was down to 10% life or less. Big move in on Ariel and will get taken out. Nice move by Beyond the Game, but they're taking massive damage in return. Charge Strike, Cassia going ham. Dansky finds another victim, and it is 5 versus 3. Now with a full HP Immortal still going on the keep. Pulse rounds on Sonya, barely kept alive. Thank you, Tyrael, with the Righteousness Shield.
This is one of those moments where it's almost worth it to consider taking a risk, but without Ariel here, without Sanctification, they don't want to go. Sometimes you can see teams with a somewhat healthy Immortal try and get some early core damage. You had the numbers advantage. Short death timers are going to play it safe. They've got themselves a Keep Grubby. That's a pretty big bonus here on Battlefield of Eternity.
Yeah, that's pretty huge. And that means that Tassadar is going to be relegated to wave clear duty more and more as the game goes on. And that really limits the style here for Beyond the Game, what they can use to employ to try and wrestle back map control. The light side here for Alarak is he completed his lightning quest. 10% sadism granted back again.
You brought up something I think that almost kind of showed, although wait a minute, we've got Cure going in here. He's going to miss the spear. They've got eyes on ST, who's trying to get out of there. The Counter-Strike goes out, doesn't hit anybody. The blind's going to be in there. The Pulse Bomb does go out. Sanctification is going to save as Alarak gets punished again. But Sonya picking up Spell Shield, as you said in the previous fight, the Pulse Bomb's going to be there. They now have so many tools to deal with that burst-style damage between Alarak and between Tracer in the Pulse Bomb. So things for Team Freedom, talent-wise, and in particular this game, looking pretty good.
Yeah, that was very well protected there. Sonya kept alive. Cure says thank you, but who should he thank? Should he thank Tyrael or Lucio here? Because devil's advocate here, the cynic in me, right? We've got Team Freedom here against Beyond the Game, and they are looking pretty damn good so far. But in order to, make it all the way, you don't want to overlap those heroics too much. So they need to get that communication right, and this is a good opportunity to do so.
I talked to Aether this morning. He said, look, if we have any issues with our macro, obviously, joking. He said, if we have any issues with our macro game or something goes on, blame it on Nasmus's accent.
What's that?
He's French Canadian. He said, blame it on his accent. I was like, it was a joke. He's like, look, if you get a chance, throw it out there if that happens. So maybe some communication. But as you said, this team, obviously, they're making sure they're very well protected, sometimes abundantly so. And now we've got 13 picked up for Beyond the Game. They might have to protect themselves a little bit more here.
Sure, trying to find an angle. Doesn't want to go in by himself, though. Crystal Aegis immediately. Slightly premature. It is a fairly low cooldown, and there are other buttons, Sound Barrier and Sanct. Overly safe is still safe. So Team Freedom plays it like that. They will take down the camp at the top, and they know the bottom bruiser is still available. Now, are they giving a little bit too much of the dance floor away to Beyond the Game here, JR?
I actually agree that they are right now. They have the catapults pushing. They knew that they could slow play this. They don't necessarily have to give it up with the spear going in, and Ego taking so much damage is forced on the retreat. The halftime show was kicked off. They have the catapults. They have the Shaman Camp pushing bottom, but now this could be a potential race, and Beyond the Game has their eyes set on a defensive posture for the moment, waiting for Tassadar to rejoin the fight.
It was such a dilemma for Tassadar. He kept moving left and right, left and right. Do I defend the core? Do I help my team? But he has made a decision. He's going to help the team, or he will die trying. And here we go. Tassadar from the side with the shields on Tracer.
Blinds are coming in. A abundantly. Pure dodging the silence there, but there's the stun, there's the engage, the Sanctification's down, Ball Lightning out in return, and it is doing so much damage on that backside, forcing Beyond the Game once more to retreat. Every time these big heroics come out, Grubby, it is just game-changing in the middle of these fights, but we've got another Crystal Aegis.
And there we have the Crystal Aegis popping. Everyone is healthy for Team Freedom, and with righteous fury, they are chasing down the members of Beyond the Game. Pursue and engage is the call, and they are certainly doing so. Tracer goes down as well. Murden has already fallen.
Oh, they're coming in for the flank. They're coming in for the flank. I don't know if Poison Spear is back up yet, but they got their eyes set on Rhaegar, who knows he's all but dead here. And Molly also in a very bad spot. That's going to be 3 members down. Make it 4 here momentarily as Tiro and Lucio finish the job. And right now, we've got ourselves a 3-level lead. Grubby, this may be getting close to ending here.
I think it might, Jay-How. We've got a pretty healthy Immortal, still in a 5 versus 3 situation, soon to be. Reinforcements again from Beyond the Game, as the death timers are pretty short on account of their low hero levels, but the Immortal still has range. It's probably going to do damage to the core here. The question is, will the core remain at 0% or 17? 50-50, it's either one of those.
Well, right now you said there's a little bit of a shield left, which means he stays in that ranged form. And against the composition like Tracer and Alarak, it's very difficult. The counter-strike going out again. ST taking a lot of damage. Ego trying to thwart this off. The shields are now down on the core, and it is falling, Grubby.
And it does look like it will be 0%. Here we've got Team Freedom going for the kill. 9-1 in takedowns, and they win with that 3-level lead. A very clean first victory. Their layers of protection were more than enough to prevent the aggression from finding too many victims. Beyond the Game loses their first.
It just seemed like they were all in, and you got that burst style composition of Alarak and Tracer. If one of those goes through, maybe. If both of them go through, great. If neither of them go through, because there's so many defensive heroics and so much protection, you're going to have a tough day trying to finish and engage in those team fights.
Exactly. If there's one thing that you do not pick Alarak for, it's to put out a nice amount of damage over the course of 10-20 seconds. It's really about that moment of telekinesis, Discord strike, silence. You need a kill in that time.
You definitely need a kill, and I think there's a few other people at the desk that probably have a few thoughts of their own on what was needed that game. We're going to send it back over to Caleris at the the analyst concave.
You got there. Well done, Jay-How. I appreciate that there. That's right, the analysis concave. We are back, and for Team Freedom, that looked pretty straightforward. Very strong defensive style, Skimmy.
Yeah, I mean, they had the sustain element for those skirmishes pre-10 especially. You tried to see them fight over camps or even just fights around that middle area, and they just couldn't survive. As they mentioned on the desk right there, they needed to find some kills. We discussed Alarak being the big factor. He wasn't able to find the silence. He wasn't able to find the counter-strike for that one shot. And every time Sank or Soundbearer was available, it found the value, and it always swung the fight for Team Freedom to carry on.
I mean, I think this game is really self-explanatory. There's not much to say about it. They couldn't get those picks. They were also playing a little bit passive at times. I feel like there were moments where an Aegis wore off and Sank wasn't available, and they just moved towards it, then moved away. And I feel like you could really feel that lack of synergy, that lack of, okay, we haven't played with this roster for a year. In fact, we haven't played with this roster for more than just a week. And I think calls were late, and there were not enough punish plays when there were very small windows, because with this comp, like you said, so much protection, so much, you got the Sank, the barrier. When there were tiny windows, they couldn't identify those, they couldn't react quickly enough.
It was really tough for BDG, I feel, to get any control of the game, because Freedom did an excellent job just running with the momentum. They get a talent lead and they exploit it, they take camps away from their opponent, force fights, stagger deaths. It was really well executed. And even in the end fight, we could see that at the beginning there was an attempt of BDG to at least make the play for the Immortal, but then the Immortal is claimed thanks to Sanctification and the Soundbearer being used. And BDG is still forced into a fight that they don't really want, because they know if they don't take the fight, they're going to lose anyways. Then in the fight, they lose 4 heroes, and it was just very clean from Team Freedom overall.
Yeah, you mentioned, this roster's only really been together for a week, practicing together for a week, and we have to give them the benefit of the doubt for that, because, those visa issues are a thing. But it did feel like, if you look at the Chinese, HGC China Phase 2 kind of pools of heroes that they're going to be going on, putting someone like Infinity on a Tracer, which he didn't play at all through Phase 2, is a very bold statement to say, okay, It's your time to shine. Here is the ball and run with it. Very difficult.
I mean, we were discussing on the desk here as the game was going on, saying like how many pulse bombs actually went off, how much value was actually found, right? And we said this comp has to find burst. The best chance they actually had was when one Punisher was achieved in the bottom lane, Immortal in the bot lane for that keep aggression with Tempo. I keep saying Tempo. Team Freedom went for that push. They go for the keep. And yeah, they went for that one shot with the Alaric. They get the kill, but it's not going to be enough. The keep still falls on down. They can't defend. If you've got a burst comp, you need to burst somebody. And if the tools are there to respond and they find the value, then you start scratching your head. Where do we go for this next game?